Okay, so that is the first of 3 lists that we're going through. Cycle of Corruption. Now, the Guard of Nurgle, the other Army of Renown. This one, I was posting lists and theory crafting, and everyone was telling me it's bad, but none of them have tried it. And they're trying to give me all these reasons, and I think that they're not seeing something. I think there's something almost abusively powerful about this Army of Renown, and if you have the right type of player on this Army of Renown, I think you can, like, crush events. It's going to be grindy, of course, but it's also just Nurgle. I think the Garden of Nurgle can lean into a playstyle that is, like, pure control and really hard to stop. So what does the Garden of Nurgle do? If you're not super familiar with it, which people probably aren't because people don't pay that much attention to Armies of Renown, basically you get lots of trees. The Feculent Gnarlmaws, you can start turn 1 with 4 on the table, because you can once per turn army, you can set up a Feculent Gnarlmaw, and it has to be outside of 3 of all enemy units, objectives, and other terrain features. So that's kind of a downside. It can't charge anybody, whatever, but it does have a decent combat profile. It's not amazing, but it's decent. 4 attacks, D3 damage. You set it up like that. Horticulus Slimix can also use his Cultivated Guard Nurgle, even if there's already multiple Feculent Gnarlmaws on the table. So you can set up 2 every turn. There's also an artifact in this that lets you set up once per game another one. So you start with 4 turn 1, and then if they don't die, turn 2 you have 6. And the thing is, they can all move, and they have to start outside of 3. They do not have to end their moves outside of 3 of objectives and terrain features. Other units, yeah, they can't charge them like hits walk into combat, but what you can do is you can block up the table like crazy. You're summoning 2 trees every single turn. The trees are quite tanky, and there's some really interesting synergies that I'll get to in a second that you can do with these trees. And when there's so many of them, it's actually kind of insane. So, Foul Fauna, you get to add 2 to the move characteristic of Nurgle Beasts and Plague Drones. So that's pretty substantial. A lot of times Nurgle sucks at moving. Being able to move a little bit better is important. You can also teleport trees. So, one of the other downsides you would normally think is like, well, once you have your trees up, they're kind of stuck there. Not so. You can move them around. And then here, Putrescent Sap, during your combat phase, every Feculent Gnarlmaw in your army gets to do D3 mortal wounds and a bad D3 mortal wounds, which may not sound all that crazy, but when you have like 6 of them, that's 63 bad D3, but still. And that's a lot. Like, that really adds up pretty quickly when you combine it with a bunch of other effects, and you'll see when I get to some of the spells and stuff like that it's really interesting. You also ignore the first damage point when you're holding the 12 of a friendly Feculent Gnarlmaw, if you're infantry. So, there's not really a lot of infantry in this list, though. I don't think that ability's as good as some of the other ones. I don't think the infantry you can play in this I don't like Plague Bearers, basically. I think they just don't do enough. So yeah, you get to set, this is the one where you get to set up an extra one. Here's some interesting spells. So you can add 1 to the damage of Putrescent Sap, so it becomes D3 plus 1 for each tree. And you don't really have, like, it's really mean. Like, wait, is it both combat phases? It's not, right? It's your combat phase, yeah. Okay. So that's kind of interesting. It's not as good as like it sounds, but it is still quite interesting. One of the more interesting things is that your army basically cannot be seen from outside of 9. And that also affects spells. So your entire army is basically immune to spells and immune to shooting. Because you have like 6 to 8 Gnarlmaws at certain points. Like, the hard part is having enough models to do it, but I'm sure you can borrow some from people and 3D print them and stuff like that. Your entire army is going to be invisible. You basically can't be seen from outside 9 every time the spell goes off. So that's really, really strong. And then also, you can turn off ward saves. So that's niche, but when it's good, it's very good. It's not good in every matchup, but when it's good, it's very good. So you can kind of see there's a sort of piling up of these rules around these trees. It's actually pretty impressive. So, oh yeah, and then this one is a command trait, and this one's really good on a Guo, which you'll see in a second, because Guos are they hit on like 4, so hitting on 3s is important, but they hit really hard when they do hit. And here's the list. It's pretty simple in a way, but there's some really interesting stuff going on. So firstly, Articulous Slimix, of course, he has to be in the list, and he's really good. And you got 4 Beasts of Nurgles. So Articulous Slimix can make those Beasts of Nurgle revive. Also in the sub-faction, they get +2 movement, so they're decently fast. And they have some really interesting synergies, which I'm going to get into when I go to the pictures that I have later. And there's a Great Unclean one. He's very tanky. He's got 2 casts. He's really nice utility. He takes up a lot of space. And he's got the Spore Seed to summon a tree, and then he can also basically have +1 hit all the time. He also gets to revive units as well. So these Plague Drones, which also have +2 movement, so they're moving quite fast, and they have Retreat and Charge. So there is 15 Plague Drones. Each one is 5 wounds. They're very hard to kill. They don't do a ton of damage, but they have decent control, and they're very hard to kill. And their downside of being flying is kind of negated by the trees, making you can't see on 9, so people can't just shoot them. Same with your Great Unclean one, because he's a monster, but he can't actually be seen from outside of that range. Most of the time. If the spell's going off, people aren't going to be able to shoot you, at all. So, a lot of the downside of playing these flying units is negated. And they all have flying, so they can pass over trees. Right? And then we have a unit of Cankerborn, which I think are a super underrated unit, but basically what they're really good at is they teleport from terrain piece to terrain piece. They're small units, they're small board space, but they can do a pretty heavy amount of damage, and they're pretty annoying to kill. And they are heroes, which is useful, so you can basically, in this sub-faction, teleport trees to heroes, and they are heroes, and they can teleport to trees, and trees can teleport to them. So that's kind of a nice little cool tech piece that you can do here. And you can basically run them up, teleport a tree to them, and then say they can't be seen outside of 9 and just hold an objective and be really, really annoying. So there's a lot of cool things you can do. I think this list really starts to make a lot more sense when you see it. So this is what it looks like just standing around, and that's a lot of flies. They have 2-inch coherency. They're very tanky. They're pretty fast in this list. There's 4 Beasts of Nurgle, which can countercharge for free, only one of them per turn, but still. And they have +2 movement, and they can be revived. All these Plague Drones can be revived. So almost everything in this list can be revived, and you're summoning 2 trees a turn that are very tanky, that have bite attacks, that also do AoE mortals each of your combat phases. So you're oftentimes going to be sitting with 6 trees. All these guys are reviving. They're all very tanky. But it's still kind of hard to see, so what I did was I kind of showed an example of some positioning stuff, and I'm going to talk about sort of what you can do here that I think really makes this fascinating. So the trees can't start next to terrain pieces, or enemy units, or objectives. But they can all move 3 inches during your turn, and they can then move on to objectives. They can move closer to terrain pieces. They can body block things. So you can, if you look at where some of these placements are, a single Beast of Nurgle, which can be revived, can block off an entire path by standing between 2 things, and basically say, no, you can't get over here. And if you do, then you're getting bitten by the tree, you're taking AoE mortals, and I can bring this guy back, and he's pretty hard to kill, and you're sitting there with various threats. You're spawning hella trees, and you can just kind of walk them up and block off entire areas. If you look on the left hand side, there's multiple trees in this area, and this is just with 4. This is not even by turn 2. Turn 2 or 3, you're gonna have even more trees than this on the table. And it starts getting kind of crazy. All of these flies have retreat and charge and flying, and very tanky. So people slamming into them, you can just retreat over their head and steal back objectives and harass the back lines. And then when they die, you can summon them back to the Guo, who most of the time can't be shot or targeted by spells because it's protected by the trees that are up there that so you can't be seen from outside of 9. So you're not really losing your go in a way that sometimes people like come down with long strikes, for example. But they can't really do that. It's super risky. It's very unlikely to work. The characteristic of trees is 3, but you get to do a lot of forward placement of them. So one of them, the first one has to start wholly in your zone. But basically, there's a lot of ways to place them forward, and you can teleport them to characters. So as you're moving up the table, they can all basically move with you, and you keep placing them forward. You can repeatedly keep placing more and more and more and more trees with this sub faction, and all the trees have 4 attacks, D3 mortals. All of them do D3 mortals each of your combat phases. You can give them +1 to the mortals output, and they really, really add up. And you can make solid walls of trees if you want to. You could very easily stick 4 base to base after 1 movement phase that block off an entire section of the table. Unless people want to come and spend like 2 turns trying to tear down those trees while they're taking mortals, and you're just summoning trees in other places at that point, moving around the table. It's actually really, really hard to deal with. And this is, I think, a really good example of what I mean by the most obvious build is not necessarily the best way to play. If you play this really optimally, yeah, like, it stops Deep Strike, Heavy List, etc., but it really stops a lot of things. Like, imagine playing Gargants, and I just keep blocking off spaces so you can't fit your big base in between the tree and the terrain piece. And maybe you could step over the tree if you're already base to base with it, but you're in combat with it. But like, if you can't fit your base there, then you can't go there. And so you're just stuck, and you fight a tree, and then I summon 2 more trees. And you fight a tree, I summon 2 more trees. And this whole time I'm scoring points and running around. If you're playing a not super high damage army, and you're just like, I just keep basically blocking off space, and you can't get all your models into me. You're only getting there's only a small area you can really get into me. So the ability to like use large numbers of models is not very effective. Even with armies like, let's say, Varengard, you can do some really interesting stuff because you have so much revival in this list. You can kind of be irritating, you'll lose some units, and then all the flies are retreating charge. And you have revivals in these units, you can kind of lose some stuff, revive multiple units, retreat, fly all over the table, and be teleporting around to trees with the Cankerborn, etc., and just kind of run away from them and keep scoring. It's pretty hard to kill an army like that, but there's a lot of skill expression to be had. Like, that's going to be a harder matchup, but like, then you can also do stuff like just body block them. Like, nice 12 Varengard, I'm just going to summon 2 trees in the middle of the table, and you can only really fit in this really thin line through them, and 1 Varengard is going to fight my unit. Cool. Maybe 2, you know. And with Nurgle, you're not going to die from that. And then they're probably going to kill the trees, but, like, now they're stuck. So there's a really... and countercharging, too, for free with the Beast of Nurgle. And you have multiple units in combat with you, so you're like splitting your attacks, and there's ward saves, and it gets real messy real quick. So I think this list has a high degree of potential, and I don't think it's obvious. And I think on first glance you're like, oh, it's a gimmick, but when you really start thinking about what's possible and how you can play this, and if you really like are sort of a map-oriented, strategic positional player, I think this playstyle has like huge potential to be something genuinely competitive. There is some mild awkwardness, and there's with like points and stuff, and like Plague Bearers kind of suck, and I wish they didn't suck because they would fit this list, but they're sort of bad, and I don't think it's worth playing the buff pieces for them. But like, I don't expect Horticulus might get a nerf of points, but this list is already 1980, so unless he goes up more than 20, I don't expect this to really have any problems. So after like a battle scroll, which you can expect some Nurgle nerfs, this will still be quite good. So something really interesting I think people should try out, and I think is a fun way to play the game. So that's list number 2 for Nurgle.